in which our lovers begin to learn the consequences of their actions. Chapter 3. "You know, I've been thinking about you," said Sergei Ivanovitch. "What's happening in your district is unheard of, from what this doctor tells me. He's quite an intelligent fellow. I've said to you before, and I'll say it again, it's not good that you don't go to the meetings and have generally withdrawn from sensible affairs. Of course, if decent people start withdrawing, God knows how things will go. We pay money, it goes to pay salaries, and there are no schools, no medical aid, no midwives, no dispensaries, nothing." "But I tried," Levine answered softly and reluctantly. "I just can't. There's no help for it." "Why can't you?" "I confess I don't understand. Indifference, inability, I don't accept. Can it be simple laziness?" "Neither the one nor the other nor the third. I tried, and I see that I can't do anything," said Levine. He hardly entered into what his brother was saying. Peering across the river at the plowed field, he made out something black, but could not tell whether it was a horse or a mounted steward. "Why can't you do anything? You made an attempt. It didn't succeed as you wanted, and you gave up. Where's your self-esteem?" "Self-esteem," said Levine, cut to the quick by his brother's words, "is something I do not understand. If I've been told at the university that others understood integral calculus, and I did not, there you have self-esteem. But here one should first be convinced that one needs to have a certain ability in these matters, and chiefly that they are all very important." "And what then? Aren't they important?" said Sergei Ivanovitch, also cut to the quick that his brother should find what interested him unimportant, and especially that he was obviously hardly listening to him. "It doesn't seem important to me. I'm not taken with it. What do you want?" answered Levine, having made out what he saw was the steward, and that the steward had probably allowed the muzhiks to quit plowing. They were turning their plows over. "Can it be they're already done plowing?" he thought. "But listen," the elder brother said, his handsome, intelligent face scowling. "There are limits to everything. It's all very well to be an eccentric, to be sincere, and to dislike falseness. I know all that. But what you're saying either has no meaning, or has a very bad meaning. When you find it unimportant that the peasantry whom you love, as you assure me—" "I never assured him," thought Konstantin Levine. "—dies without help. Crude midwives kill off babies, and the peasantry rot in ignorance and remain in the power of every scrivener, and you are given the means to help them. But you don't help them, because in your opinion it's not important." And Sergei Ivanovitch confronted him with a dilemma. Either you're so undeveloped that you cannot see all that you could do, or you cannot give up your peace, your vanity, whatever, in order to do it. Konstantin Levine felt that it only remained for him to submit, or to confess to a lack of love for the common cause, and this offended and upset him. "Both the one and the other," he said resolutely. "I don't see how it's possible." "What? Impossible to give medical help if money is placed in the right way?" "Impossible, it seems to me. In our district, with its 3,000 square miles, with our slush, blizzards, seasonal field work, I see no possibility of providing medical help everywhere. Besides, I generally don't believe in medicine." "Well, excuse me, but that's not fair. I can give you 1,000 examples. While in schools? Why schools? What are you saying? Can there be any doubt of the usefulness of education? If it's good for you, it's good for everyone. Constantine Levine felt himself morally driven into a corner, and therefore got excited, and involuntarily let out the main reason for his indifference to the common cause. Maybe all that is good, but why should I worry about setting up medical centers that I'll never use, and schools that I won't send my children to, that the peasants don't want to send their children to either, and that I have no firm belief that they ought to send them to, he said. Sergei Ivanovitch was momentarily surprised by this unexpected view of things, but he at once devised a new plan of attack. He paused, raised one rod, dropped the line in again, and turned to his brother with a smile. Well, excuse me. First there's a need for medical centers. Here we just summoned the district doctor for Agafya Mikhailovna. Well, I think her arm will stay crooked. And there's still a question. And then a literate music or worker is more needful and valuable to you. No, ask anybody you like, Constantine Levine replied resolutely. A literate peasant is much worse as a worker, and the roads can't be repaired, and the bridges are no sooner put up than they steal them. However, said the frowning Sergei Ivanovitch, who did not like contradictions, especially the sort that kept jumping from one thing to another and introduced new arguments without any connections, so that it was impossible to know which to answer. However, that's not the point. Excuse me, do you acknowledge that education is good for the peasantry? I do, Levine said inadvertently, and immediately thought that he had not said what he thought. He sensed that, once he acknowledged that, it would be proved to him that he was speaking rubbish that did not make any sense. How would it be proved to him he did not know, but he knew that it would be doubtless be proved to him logically, and he waited for this proof. The argument turned out to be much simpler than he expected. If you acknowledge it as a good, said Sergei Ivanovitch, then being an honest man, you can't help liking and sympathizing with such a cause, and therefore working for it. But I have not yet acknowledged it as a good, said Constantine Levine, blushing. How's that? You just said, that is, I do not acknowledge it either as a good or as possible. You can't know that without having tried. Well, suppose, said Levine, though he did not suppose it at all, suppose it's so, but all the same I don't see why I should worry about it. How do you mean? No, since we're talking, explain it to me from a philosophical point of view, said Levine. I don't understand what philosophy's got to do with it, said Sergei Ivanovitch, in such a tone it seemed to Levine as if he did not recognize his brother's right to discuss philosophy, and that vexed Levine. It's got this to do with it, he began hotly. I think that the motive force of all our actions is, after all, personal happiness. In our present-day Zemstvo institutions, I, as a nobleman, see nothing that contributes to my well-being. The roads are no better, and cannot be better. My horses carry me over the bad ones as well. I have no need of doctors and centers. I have no need of any justice of the peace. I have never turned to one, and never will. Schools I not only do not need, but also find harmful, as I told you. For me, the Zemstvo institution, there's simply an obligation to pay 6 kopecks an acre, go to town, sleep with bedbugs, and listen to all sorts of nonsense and vileness, and personal interest does not move me to do that. Excuse me, Sergei Ivanovitch interrupted with a smile, but personal interest did not move us to work for the emancipation of the serfs, and yet we did. No, Constantine interrupted, growing more heated. The emancipation of the serfs was a different matter. There was a personal interest. We wanted to throw off the yoke that oppressed us and all good people. But to be a council member, arguing about how many privy cleaners are needed and how the sewer pipes could be installed in a town I don't live in, to be a juror and judge of music who has stolen a ham, and listen for 6 hours to defense lawyers and prosecutors pouring out all sorts of drivel, and hear the foreman of the jury ask my old Alyoshka the fool, Mr. Defendant, do you acknowledge the fact of the stolen ham? What? Constantine Levine was already sidetracked, impersonating the foreman of the jury and Alyosha the fool. It seemed to him that it was all to the point. But Sergei Ivanovitch shrugged his shoulders. Well, what do you mean to say? I only mean to say that I will always defend, with all my might, those rights that touch on my interests. When the gendarmes searched us as students and read our letters, I was ready to defend those rights with all my might, to defend my rights to education, to freedom. I understand military service, which touches the future of my children, my brothers, and myself. I'm ready to discuss anything that concerns me. But to decide how to dispose of 40,000 in Zemstvo funds, or to judge Alyoshka the fool, that I do not understand, and cannot do. Constantine Levine spoke as if his words had burst their dam. Sergei Ivanovitch smiled. And if you were brought to trial tomorrow, do you mean you'd rather be tried by the old criminal courts? I won't be brought to trial. I'm not going to kill anybody, and I have no need of all that, really. He went on, again skipping to something completely inappropriate. Our Zemstvo institutions and all that, it's like the birches we stick up on the day of the Trinity, so that it looks like the forest that grew up by itself in Europe, and I can't put my heart into watering and believing in those birches. Sergei Ivanovitch merely shrugged his shoulders, expressing by this gesture his surprise at the appearance out of nowhere of these birches in their discussion, though he immediately understood what his brother meant to say by it. Excuse me, but one cannot argue that way, he observed. But Constantine Levine wanted to vindicate himself in this shortcoming which he knew he had, in his indifference to the common good, and he went on. I think, said Constantine, that no activity can be solid unless it's based on personal interest. That is a general truth, a philosophical one, he said, resolutely repeating the word philosophical, as if wishing to show that he too had the right, like anyone else, to speak of philosophy. Sergei Ivanovitch smiled once more. And he too has some sort of philosophy of his own to serve his inclinations, he thought. Well, you should leave the philosophy alone, he said. The chief task of philosophy in all ages has consisted precisely in finding the connection that necessarily exists between personal and common interests. But that is not the point. The point is that I must correct your comparison. The birches are not stuck in, they are planted or seeded, and they ought to be carefully tended. Only those nations have a future, only those nations can be called historical, that have a sense of what is important and significant in their institutions, and value them. And Sergei Ivanovitch transferred the question to the philosophical, historical realm, inaccessible to Constantine Levine, and showed him all the incorrectness of his view. As regards your not liking it, forgive me, but what is our Russian laziness and grand manner? And I'm sure that with you it's a temporary error, and it will pass. Constantine was silent. He felt himself roundly beaten, but together with that he felt that his brother had not understood what he had wanted to say. Only he did not know why he had not understood, whether it was because he had not been able to say clearly what he meant, or because his brother had been unwilling or unable to understand him. But he did not go deeper into these thoughts, and, without objecting to his brother, began thinking about a completely different matter, a personal one for him. Sergei Ivanovitch reeled in the last line. Constantine untied the horse, and they drove off. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.